for attending again today. Can I start with a compliment to your social media team? It has a nice balance between humour and information in what is sometimes a very hostile environment, so it's reassuring and pleasing. I'd also like to compliment Minister Morton for his voting integrity bills, Minister, and his acknowledging the work that I did in forming those initiatives with my integrity of elections bill that preceded it. I think it's very important for people to understand, voters right around the country, to be assured that their vote will not be wasted and that there is no reason to not vote. There is every reason to turn up now because we'll be having audits of the election processes. So my first question today is, as a result of multiple reports from constituents who went into a booth in previous elections and were told they'd already voted, this may be human error by the poll worker, yet I think the only issue, I think, is Minister Morton's electoral integrity package failed to address that my bill did. For clarity, there are two types of multiple voting. One where a person votes multiple times under their own name, and another where a person votes multiple times under different names. The first one, multiple voting under one's own name, has been very well examined, and the conclusion seems to be that it does not make a tangible difference because we've now got electronic rolls in most booths. Not all, but most. So let's turn to the second one, people voting multiple times under different names. So has the AEC done any work on this issue?
Well, Senator, this is something, we look at the entire voting process at the end of every election. We put as you know, a submission into the Joint Standing Committee on Electoral Matters, where we raise issues that we think have been flagged during the conduct of the previous election. And many of those observations are our observations, and many of them are also passed to us by others. The issue of multiple voting has been dealt with in those submissions previously and in supplementary submissions. What you're referring to there is impersonation, and that's not something that we've had any evidence that has had any sort of impact on the election at all. It's not something that's been raised with us in any formal way previously. It's not something that has been put into a submission at the Joint Standing Committee at all. To the best of my memory. So that's not something that we're looking at all.
Okay.
And the other thing with impersonation, Senator, is that those sorts of things do become known, because if someone was doing impersonation on a large scale, we would get feedback from a range of different sources that would be the case. Don't forget that many of these polling booths are actually community polling booths where people know other people in the community as well. So it's not something that's been personally raised with me. I'm not sure the Deputy Commissioner, whether that's been raised with you.
No, that's correct. Jeff Pope, Deputy Electoral Commissioner. And I would add, Senator, that there's another category, which is what we call apparent multi-voting, which is actually an administrative error where someone has been marked as voting on a paper certified list, and they've put the wrong mark against a person's name.
Okay.
So there is So sometimes it can be seen as being something else, but it is simply an administrative error.
So is there a phone number or a way of reporting occurrences in order to further investigate the problem, if there is a problem?
On our website, Senator, there is a
fraud email reporting process.
And people are welcome to use that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the AEC stopped residency checks last century, 1995. When was the last time the AEC audited, let's say, a sample of the electoral roll to get an idea of accuracy?
We use a whole range of tools to check the accuracy of the electoral roll, and we conduct internal audits on that. I think the ANAO also conducted an audit of the electoral roll. If anyone remembers when that might have been. A lot of shaking heads, but we could find that for you fairly easily. So it's been audited even by the ANAO, Senator. In fact, now that I'm warming to my theme, I think it may have been audited twice. And I'd have to check that for you, because they came, if I'm wrong, I apologise to the ANAO, because but I think they came back to check the results of the initial audit. So I'm happy to come back to you on that.
Okay,
but
if you could, please.
So there's more than one way of auditing the accuracy of the roll. The second thing is, when we get data on someone's residence from more than one data source, which is what we do, we effectively triangulate that data to make sure that it's accurate. We also do, as I mentioned before, our own internal checks of the accuracy of our data entry as well to make sure that that is an accurate process.
We do, and we match our data with a range of other data sources, Senator, and we do an annual quality assurance process also.
So although you say you haven't had any evidence or you don't see much possibility of it, this is a case surely where voter ID would stop someone voting multiple times under different names or voting under the names of people who are no longer voting themselves. Well, I know what you're saying about community, but sometimes people rock up to a booth that's not in their community.
Senator, I might just perhaps repeat what we said at the last estimates. I'm loath to get involved in the issue of the voter ID process. I think that's a highly political issue. It's a matter for Parliament. I do know, and I'm genuinely trying to be right down the centre here, I understand the arguments on both sides of this, but it has become a very polarising debate in places where this has been implemented. So that's a matter for Parliament. What we're reflecting on here is the processes that we put in place to assure the vote within the legislation that's currently valid. That bit about voter ID is something that I think I a little flippantly said last time we have a definite policy not to have a policy on because we don't get dragged into that process.
I can see that, I accept it. It is ironic then, Minister, that we need a voter ID, we need an ID to get into a pub, but we don't need an ID to get into a vote. That's just a comment.
No, your comments noted, Senator Roberts, and indeed the government would wish that there had been or were broader support for some of the ID measures that, as you acknowledged, Minister Morton had brought forward.